Well, we're staying with the story now, and let's get some more analysis now on the Federal Congress and the new DA leadership. We're joined now via our Skype line by political analyst Ongama Mtimka. Ongama, thanks so much for your time on the lead. Your thoughts, let's perhaps start with this very close race for the position of DA Federal Chair between Athol Trollip and Solly Msimanga.
Thank you, Michelle. Good morning to your viewers. So for me, going to this conference, I thought there was mainly a contestation of ideas, and the competing ideas were the extent to which the DA should transform itself in terms of representation in order to attract the majority vote. There was a view that need to happen in a more robust way, whereas another view was you don't want to change the values of the party so fundamentally that you end up alienating the constituency that the party fought hard to be the official representatives of, which is the minorities. So the Democratic Alliance since 2004 became the official representative political party or political home of minority interests in South Africa, and we know that since then it has been attempting to actually grow beyond that to attract the majority voter also. So the debate between the contestation between Solly Msimanga and Athol Trollip, in my view, was one that reflected those ideas between transforming so that you could not only lead competently at a national level, but also attract either the new constituencies or continue to appease and satisfy the existing constituencies. And it seems to me that the outcome, both in terms of the election of Trollip as well as the incorporation of that diversity clause, was sort of win-win from a policy point of view, but from a leadership point of view, it shows that the conservative grouping still has got a lot of power within the DA.
Yeah, Mr. Mtimka, let's stay with this issue around the amendment of this diversity clause. So the DA has now said that it will embrace diversity, but it is opposed to quotas. What does that say about the party?
So every policy needs mechanisms to implement it in order for it to be realized. You can see from how a policy is framed or it is introduced whether or not it has chances of success. So in this instance, the Democratic Alliance has incorporated diversity in its values, and that's big in the sense that this is a strongly libertarian party that while acknowledging redress doesn't need, it has, for example, opposed things like affirmative action and quotas in sport and related. So it's been true to form that the DA rejected quotas, but the strange thing is that you do need mechanisms to be able to track whether or not you are able to implement your policy, and to give your membership the ability to evaluate you on that. And I think while maybe it is good for them, given their ideology, to reject quotas, I don't think they've created an unambiguous enough framework in terms of how they have framed what they are going to do to be able to be held to account. So this leadership may say anything is representation, anything is diversity, without actually being held to account on specifics.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, out of 8 officials elected on Sunday, one of those officials is a woman, and the majority of those officials, white men.
Yeah. So you see, there's always a disjuncture between what political parties claim to represent and what gets to be the outcomes of power dynamics in their party. And the reason why there would be such a disjuncture is precisely by design and structure. So if you look at the mechanisms to campaign for political office, they are highly patriarchal, where you find those who are the most aggressive, those who are able to scheme the most, and those who are able to broker coalitions across party structures, and in a mainly, and I use this word, aggressive style, tend to be the ones that win. So in order to have more balanced outcomes, you need to ensure that the campaign processes right from the start are underlined by the values. So for example, at candidate nomination stages earlier on in earlier structures, you want to be able to say, these are the candidates that are coming up. How are we faring from a gender representation point of view? But those people who subscribe to a libertarian principle that says, as long as you don't have any restrictions that prevent women from competing, you've done enough. But people with a positive approach to freedom and liberty will say, actually, it's not enough to just not have restrictions. You need to have mechanisms built right across party structures that ensure that the outcomes always reflect the values and the principles that are being pursued at a given time.
Mr. Mtimka, let's talk about this recall clause, what many people are in fact calling the de Lille clause. What are your thoughts on that?
Michelle, it's not uncommon for organizations to learn from reality and come up with policy mechanisms that help them deal better with that reality. The DA shouldn't even try to shy away from the fact that this clause arose out of that debacle with that Patricia de Lille, as well as to some limited extent some of its leaders like Helen Zille, who have been caught on the wrong side of the party. But here's the thing about the political imperatives like this: they have a potential to strengthen the hand of the party in meddling in government affairs. So, for example, if Patricia de Lille's persecution was not, as claimed, administrative, but rather refusal to toe a party line in a way that she saw was not in line with the principles of government, the strengthening of the party's hand with the clause to recall her means, in the final analysis, you will have what the ANC has, where in the time of Jacob Zuma, where somebody speaks out and says their first commitment is to the party and not to the office that they have been called in. Yes, political parties must have mechanisms to discipline their people that they have deployed, but the risk is always that loyalty then becomes more to the party than it is to the public office.
And of course the question now is, I mean, Patricia de Lille herself has been asked the question, why stay with a party that so clearly does not want you in it? And she says for her part that what she wants to do is in fact clear her name. And let's say she does that and all of those processes are completed. Where to then for Patricia de Lille?
Politics is not fair. Politics is not necessarily moral. Outcomes of politics are not necessarily the best morally. Politics is power plays the ultimate role. If I were her, I would actually, notwithstanding the perceived injustice, actually tender one's resignation. I think leaders can learn a lot from Thabo Mbeki, who said once they had fallen out of favor with their party, notwithstanding some of the gripes they may have with the process, to actually say, well, it's not sustainable to be a leader deployed by a party, but you are at war with that party. Let me rather tender my resignation. And history has a way of actually vindicating people. So trusting in vindication rather than wanting to fight willy-nilly to retain office when you have lost favor with the party that sends you in parliament is difficult. And until we have a presidential system in South Africa where voters vote directly for public representatives, that's the reality of the situation that politicians will continue to find themselves in.
All right, well, thanks very much for your insight on this issue. That was Ongama Mtimka.